Hello and welcome to my Prey review. So in this video I'm going to be going over why I think Prey is a good game and also specific things it has going for it and things that are working against it. So overall, for the pros, I have combat is solid. So the combat feels pretty decent. It's pretty simple, pretty streamlined. You have like abilities that you can get, the Typhon abilities. And you also have, your weapons, and different weapons do different things. So combat's solid. Weapons are interesting and fun. The glue gun comes to mind. There's some other interesting weapons. They have conventional weapons, but most of the weapons have like some unique property. So that's definitely a pro as well. There is replay value because you can run different builds. Generally, you can't max everything out. You probably can if you like manufacture a ton of neuro mods, but by that point you'd be really overpowered if you had every stat. So I'm gonna give this game in the pros section. It has replay value. There are different viable builds. You can make a build where you just use leverage 3 and just throw things at enemies, and that would be viable if you did it correctly. It would be kind of difficult, but you could just like pick up heavy things and just throw them at enemies out in the open. There are also nightmare and survival options. So anytime a game has like difficulty options, that's always a pro in my book. They're optional too, so you don't have to have survival options. You can just play a nightmare, or if you want that extra challenge to add pressure to resources, you can enable all the survival options. So that's definitely good. Resources are scarce. This is very important for me. For a game where resources feel like they should be limited or that they are limited, they should be limited. They should be hard to get. They should be hard to come by. So definitely a big pro. You kind of have to be smart with ammo. You can't just run around and kill everything for the most part. You kind of can if you know what you're doing, but you generally have to be smart with resources, and I do like that. I do also like the survival conditions. So when you enable survival options, you can have conditions. This makes it so that you have to carry extra items with you, which also adds pressure to resource management. So right now, I'm just starting a new character. This time I'm playing as the female Morgan Yu just for variety, just to see if there's any differences. So far it just seems like the model and the some small things are different. But aside from that, the conditions require you to take up more inventory slots for the most part, so that like if you get burn trauma, for example, it reduces your max health, so you need to carry derma weave. So I actually do like conditions. Those are pretty cool. Another thing this game has going for it is easy to die and mistakes are heavily punished. So if you carelessly walk into like an electrical discharging like breaker or whatever, you will generally die or take significant damage, and considering the fact that resources are scarce and you can get conditions, you generally don't want to do that. So you can be, you can die pretty easily. Enemies can kill you quite quickly, so that adds to the tension of combat. So I actually do like that. Inventory management forces you to optimize and carry limited things. That's another pro. If you can carry everything, like games tend to become too easy. So it's usually a good thing if you have inventory management or at least inventory restriction. Restrictions are great. Restrictions are how you balance something. So if you have no restrictions, like in the case of like BioShock 1, where you can just carry like 10 weapons with all these different ammo types, then at any point in time you can whip out any of those weapons and just completely demolish whatever's in front of you, or use them situationally. Whereas if you're forced to carry only like 2 or 3 weapons, you now have to wisely choose which weapons you're bringing with you and why, and build around those. So that's a big upside. Recycling and crafting is very streamlined and polished. I actually really like the recycling system. It's one of the most polished crafting systems I've interacted with in a long time, and I actually appreciate it. It's very similar to like Metro Exodus's crafting system, which is just very basic. There's like certain materials. You can just convert those materials into different things. I don't really know. I don't remember exactly where I'm supposed to go here because I'm just kind of focusing on this video, but I think I have to go through here. Alright, and then we have a good plot overall. I would say the story's pretty good. And then after the plot, there are a lot of side quests, and a lot of the side quests are quite good, and they're quite interesting. So they actually have, like good side quests. So if you're like a fan of like Fallout New Vegas, which has pretty good side quests, you'll like this game. Alright, so now let's go over the cons.
Cacoplasmas. Everyone calls them mimics.
Alright, we got a mimic.
Be careful what you pick up.
kill this mimic. Alright, he had nothing on him. Alright, so for the cons, backtracking. Alright, this is a huge con, because in this game, the environments all generally look pretty similar, with like slight differences, but they all kind of look like this, right? So the game has a lot of backtracking. As you're going through the side quests, as you're going through the main quest, you're going to be backtracking a lot. The areas do change a little bit, but in my opinion, not that much. And there easily could have been more areas with like different like backgrounds and different assets and all these other things. But I understand that it's a space station, and it wouldn't make sense for there to be like some cool like cave area or whatever the hell, unless it was like on the moon or some planet nearby. So I guess that one you have to take with a good grain of salt. Like the areas look samey, and there's a lot of backtracking. All right, so that brings me on to con number 2: similar looking environments. So the game, quick save really quick. The game does have a lot of similar looking environments because it is just a space station. So you would expect that. Now, that's not to say that, like, they're not creative and they can't come up with ideas. Like, obviously they can. Like, I'm familiar with Arcane Studios' work, and they easily could have added some shit, but they're trying to go for realism. So if you're going for realism, you generally are going to get, like, an overall, like, Black Mesa type look. Like, if you played the Half-Life 1 remake Black Mesa, it's pretty much like the labs in Black Mesa. However, in Black Mesa, there's also the whole alien world of Zen, which completely changes things, and the desert levels and the canyon levels and all, and like the canal and all this other shit. So you can have a science environment and have it feel realistic with also having variety. But in the case of a space station, you're definitely limited. So I'm going to kind of give them a pass on the environments looking similar. Most enemies are very similar. You generally kill things the same way using specific abilities or weapons every encounter. So when I find a mimic, for low-level mimics, what I do is I just smack them with wrenches. For higher-level mimics, I get Psycho Shock and just Psycho Shock them, and then if they still have health left, smack them with a wrench hit. For any biotic enemy, I generally do the exact same thing. I use Psycho Shock on them and then just like shoot them with a shotgun. So generally, you will be playing the game in this way. Like, you'll figure out what works, and then you'll just start killing things by using what works. So there's not really room for dynamic encounters. Combat is too fast, so it's pretty straightforward. For a game with like abilities, there's like not too many ways you can really get away with like fighting enemies. So I guess take that one with a grain of salt. But compared to like Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, there's so many different ways you can kill enemies in that game, and like different ways you can handle combat. Like you can even just like grab like a rock in the game and just kill enemies by throwing rocks at them, and it's actually very effective. So like you can kick them, you can like use all the different weapons. So combat variety can be kind of like repetitive. Another con: no headshotting, and it's all random crits. I'm not a fan of randomness when it comes to crits. I prefer crits to be skill based. So the fact that it's random crits is definitely a con in my book. I would rather it be headshots. Another con: no boss fights. As far as I can tell, the only boss fights are nightmare encounters, and those are not very hard. Like, as long as you just sprint and use the shotgun, you are good. This one's probably... one of these is a... there we go. One of these is a mimic. Just a matter of which one. Alright, so finally, for cons, we have the space sections. Alright, so here's the thing with the space sections. It should feel awkward to be in space, because being in space is not something we're used to. So I kind of give this one a pass, but I still felt like mentioning it, because the space sections were like not fun at all. And it's not to say they should be. Maybe they should be tense and awkward and weird, and like, I get what they're going for it by doing that. But for me, the space sections were kind of annoying. And then like fighting in space was even more annoying, but like this is kind of a con, kind of not, because if you want a game to be hard, like in Metro Exodus, for example, there are like sections where you're like on a rowboat and your dude rows really slow, and then enemies are like jumping out and attacking you, and you have to like deal with them. And while it is annoying, it adds tension by making it difficult and awkward. So I guess I'll give that con a pass. But overall, I'd say I would like give the game like an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. If it didn't have backtracking, I would give it like a 9. Like if it alright, here's the thing with backtracking. If you do it right, it can be interesting. However, it felt like the enemies were all very similar, so even when I revisited these areas, like not too much was different. So that's really why it's like a con in this case. But overall, definitely a good game. I'd recommend you play it. If you like BioShock, it'll be pretty fun. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's more like Metro Exodus because of how fast combat is, especially on Nightmare and with survival options. But I guess if you play on easier difficulties, it'd feel more like a BioShock game and less like a survival sim. But yeah, that is my Prey 2017 review. Overall, it's a good game. The only major gripes I have were the backtracking, similar looking environments, no headshotting, and no boss fights. The plot's good. I'm gonna try to not spoil the plot. I'll just kind of refer to it vaguely, so if you haven't played the game, you won't feel like I ruined the plot. So, alright. So yeah, that's it for that. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you in the actual Prey tutorials.